Good morning, everyone. Oh, it's very nice to see all your smiling faces this morning. Oh, very good. Thank you all for joining us this morning and happy Monday. Look, I am all over the place at the moment, like actually all over the place. Can I get a feeling from you all just straight away in the chat box where you're all at? How are you feeling? Go on, tell me where you're at. Are you, oh, there we go. We've got some scatters. Oh, Karen's really good. Nice. Oh, Paul, are you pumped? I just said when I spotted your name appear that I've been meaning to give you a buzz. Roller coaster. I'm feeling you, Georgie. Good today. Cheryl's struggling on how to focus. Oh, honestly, the amount of false starts I had trying to work out what I was going to do with you guys today. I feel that. Groundhog Day, discombobulated, positive with good workflow coming. All right, Steve, on top. Oh, Shane was focused today, but not last week. It's very up and down, isn't it? Shit yesterday, but good today. My weekend was a bit like that. My Saturday was just utter brilliance. Like it was a beautiful day here in Wellington. I got lots of work done on my book. I felt very onto it and motivated and brilliant. And I went to bed on Saturday night, just like, oh, what a life. Everything's great, isn't it? And then woke up on Sunday morning, just an absolute raging bitch, like just, just awful. And I couldn't quite identify what had happened between going to bed on Saturday night and getting up on Sunday morning, but utter misery. Yeah, so look, I'm all over the place at the moment, and I'm hearing that that's not just me that's going through that. So that's quite encouraging. And actually, I had this great conversation last week with my middle child, Charlotte. She's 10, and we have this code in my house for if you need to have a proper conversation. So how many of you have kids? Chuck in the chat box if you've got kids. Yeah. Oh, 3, the magic number, Paul. Yeah. Okay. So a bunch of us have got kids, right? So you know that kids come at you all the time, right? Mom, dad, and it's pretty constant, and it's not always easy to figure out when you need to be that kind of present, excellent parent that you read books about, and when you just need to like swat them away like flies or manage incoming requests. And so we have a code in my house for if you need an actual conversation, you start with, have you got a minute? And so I know that if one of my girls says, have you got a minute? That's code for, okay, actually, this is a real thing. They don't just want another snack. And so last week, I think it was Tuesday night, Charlotte came to me around bedtime and she was like, have you got a minute? Well, okay, here we go. And it had been a tough couple of days, like just a bit like this, and the tensions of being at home with the 3 kids and my partner and I, and trying to work and do everything, and just sort of just been feeling things rise in the house. And so Charlotte sat down and was explaining to me that she felt like things were going, how did she put it? Feels like things are going up and up and up. I mean, you know, that's a pretty good summary. And so we had a good chat about it. And then I actually had her at the end of our chat summarize a piece of what she'd been saying to camera. I know, isn't that awful? Like having a mother who does this kind of work is like, could you say a bit of that to camera? But she did, and I have a 15-second clip that I would love to share with you, which I think is quite a good little summary of the chat that we had, and certainly reflects some of the conversations I've been having in a professional setting over the last week or so. So let's see if I can share that with you now. Can everybody see Charlotte's lovely pajamaed face? Give me a nod if you can. Yeah, okay, hopefully you can hear it as well.
I can't keep up with my own emotions as well as everybody else.
Hang on a minute, that's very quiet. How's the sound on that, Cam? Can you hear it okay? All right.
I can't keep up with my own emotions as well as everybody else's, and where they're at and how I need to feel for other people, and then I do something wrong and they feel bad, and then one emotion spreads through the whole house.
What I like about that particular explanation of where we're at is this idea that one emotion spreads to the whole house. And this idea that all it really takes is for one person to be off or discombobulated for it to kind of spread. And I feel a certain level of responsibility on that one. So I kind of have this belief, this is a very gendered belief, but I kind of have this belief that like the woman in the house generally sets the tone. And so if mum's not feeling good or your wife's not feeling good, it's pretty hard for anybody else to feel good either, because you all feel the effects of it. And so look, I've been having these conversations with clients over the last probably week or two, and we've been having a lot of conversations about this shift. And one of those shifts is kind of what Charlotte was talking about, which is kind of this, what did she call it? Up and up and up, right? Where I feel like the first kind of week or two, definitely the first week pre-lockdown and then into lockdown, there was this real kind of adrenaline rush type environment, at least at my house. And it was very much like crisis management mode. And we were like, right, we've got to get everything done, and we've got to get online, and we've got to get awesome and make sure that our clients are okay, and are the kids going to be sorted, and how are we going to organize everything, and can everyone work from home? And it was this very like adrenaline focused crisis response type state. And the problem with adrenaline is that like it doesn't last forever, it wears off. And I'm starting to see this kind of shift happening as we're shifting out of crisis response mode and into settling or management mode, where it's like, okay, now what? What are we left with? What are we doing next? And that's a very uncertain type of environment, I think, because while we've been given this very clear direction here in New Zealand about what we need to do, and we were all able to mobilise to make that happen, there's now the stage of, right, so now that we're settling into that, I've been derailed partway through by very clever Paul Bennett in the chat with shift happens and then you have to clean it up. Very good. But yeah, moving from that high energy crisis response state into actually what do we do now and for the interim is something that I'm seeing popping up as a challenge all over the place. And the topic for today's webinar, what we want to discuss today, is kind of through that communication lens. And how is that showing up in the way that we're communicating with each other and with our teams? So on the home front for us, the way that that's showing up communication-wise is that stress can present as grumpiness. So I posted on LinkedIn this morning and to promote this webinar and was saying, you know how you're stomping around the house like, what is wrong with everybody today? Like, why is everybody so frustrating today? Why won't anybody listen? And then occasionally you get that glimpse of self-insight that's like, actually, maybe it's not everybody else. And my teenage daughter is particularly good at being able to say very diplomatically, maybe it's not just us. So that's how it's showing up here. And then last week, I took a look at a piece of internal comms before it went out for a team at NZTA about a workshop that we're running on Wednesday. And the conversations that we were having was, everybody seems to be in such different places and at different places at any given time of the day. It's really hard to know how to pitch our comms. So we're talking about doing this or continuing with this program that we've had on, which is all about business improvement. So it's about accelerating delivery and streamlining process and improving business systems inside transport services, which I mean is more important now than ever because there's a whole lot of work about to be done, right? But the challenge with describing this program and what's happening next was like, oh, but for people who are already feeling really pressured, how do we communicate this in a way that doesn't make them feel more pressured or like we want more from them? But for people who are experiencing a bit of margin and are settling well into their new life, how do we pitch this in a way that's motivating or inspiring? And for everybody else, how are we pitching it in a way where it just lands as, this is a great thing to do, I need to stay on track and keep momentum? And the challenge of trying to get one piece of comms out that potentially met every end of that spectrum was really fascinating. So there's kind of that personal and professional interplay of the different ways that that shift is starting to show up communication-wise. So what I'd really like to do, thinking about those examples, is to have a bit of a chat, and we'll use our breakout rooms for this because it's really nice for us to be able to talk to each other about some examples that you might have of the shift that's taking place in your team or in your life and how that's impacting your communication. So I'll give you that brief again a little bit more clearly. So I'm wanting to ask for some examples of ways that you've seen a shift in our environment and how that's affecting communication. So I'm going to get Nikki very shortly. Oh, not Nikki, actually. I've just remembered this is my job this morning. I'm going to pop you all into discussion rooms really quickly. And I would love for us to share some examples of ways that we're seeing a shift and how that's showing up in our communication. So I'm going to pop you all into rooms now. You should get an invitation now, and I'll see you all back in 5 minutes or so.
Or if you, I don't know what your close friends or other family are doing, but it's everyone's in a different place. So it's, and you're kind of leading the charge, I suppose, as part of the camp. So Steve's talking about.
Hi everyone, I see we're all coming back in. Oh, it's nice to see you all reappear. We've got 28 seconds left, so you guys are ahead of the curve. Did everyone have a good chat? Yeah, nice. In the breakout room that I was in with Louise and Tracy and others, we talked about a few different things, and one of them was about the challenges communicating where in a workplace environment, if you're used to working physically with your co-workers, there's a lot of informal or less tangible types of communication that take place that we haven't necessarily accounted for in our shift to online. So those 2-minute chats with someone, or overhearing someone else's conversation, or crossing paths in a tea room, that stuff's quite hard to simulate virtually. I read an article yesterday about a workplace, I can't remember what it is, so that really takes away from the quality of the story, but let's forge on regardless, where they're running like a virtual kitchen. So it's a large team, hundreds of staff, and they have a virtual kitchen running where when you make your coffee, you log into that. And for 3 or 4 minutes, whoever else happens to be in the kitchen at the same time, you have a chat in the same way that you would at work, which is nice. It feels a little bit token. And I think those other points that we were talking about in our chat around, actually, what about the overhearing conversations, or not feeling as though you have to save up questions or what you've got to say for your next meeting, but being able to tap someone on the shoulder. That's certainly popping out. And then we had a really good chat where Louise was talking about her role as an education leader and trying to communicate with a bunch of different kinds of people that all have completely different expectations. So it's that whole, it's not just that everybody is in different places physically, or in different places coping wise or emotionally, but actually people have different needs, and those things aren't just complicated, sometimes they're conflicting. And so in Louise's role, it's how do we satisfy the expectations of our board and our principal and our teachers, as well as our parents, as well as our children and our students and the ministry. And by the time we've ticked that list off, is there anything we can say or do that actually hits the mark for everyone? Because she was saying we're trying to do communication, and I was going, man, I keep getting these emails from my kids' schools and I'm not even reading them because there's too many, and I'm already getting twice as many emails as normal. I don't know what's going on. I wasn't even clear that school was going back next week. Turns out it is. I'd really like to hear about some of the conversations that you had. And actually, I'd quite like to throw to you, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind sharing, because I hear that you've got a good story about how you're working with your team on the communication front. Could you unmute yourself, Lynn?
Yes, hi everybody, I'm Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi. I was really drawn to this webinar because the title that you'd used, and I came across it a couple of weeks ago when you first sent out one of your updates, Alicia, and the less content and more connection really struck me at that time, because I was noticing people, that crisis management that you talked about, and there's that real drive for people to get some stuff done and keep momentum and have all the activity and the task happening. And I was actually just trying to slow people down a little, just saying, hold on, let's just kind of take some time here. All of our environments were changing. And of course, and for some people, they became quite anxious about what this new environment was going to look like. And I did quite a lot of reading, and there was a couple of articles recently as well, just in terms of what the impacts are and what those longer term impacts are. And so just letting people come to terms with, this is different, this isn't the same. But we set up some really good ways of working over the last couple of weeks to help people try to deal with their different situations. As you just alluded to, Alicia, you know, it's just that people are dealing with different challenges. Some people have got school-aged children at home, which I feel lucky that I haven't, because how they're coping is incredible. But we use a tool called Signal day to day. Obviously, we're using the meeting Zoom Meet for formal meetings, but Signal as a tool has been really useful for our team. I think you can set up team groups in that, and we start with daily videos from one member of the team, and it just cycles through everybody, just saying hi to everybody. We've got an informal channel and a formal channel, and you can create subgroups as well. And I think that me just at the very beginning trying to slow people down, take some time and sharing personal stories. So I'm much more of a feeler, and then we have our people who just want to get on with the tasks and get some stuff done. So I was just working with get some tasks done, but let's also just share how we're going, look at the sun out there, sharing pictures of a walk or something like that. So, and also just letting people know that everybody's working differently. So for some people, having kids at home means that they do a few hours and then they'll be offline for a few hours and they'll come back later potentially. My pattern was I always wanted to do a lunchtime walk. So we're up early, we're online, and then trying to keep that 12 till 2 slot free so that we get some time to get out or do whatever we want to do, a bit of yoga or a walk in the sun, whatever it might be. So yeah, I think that's my story and just how we've tried to connect and how I've tried to keep the quality of content going, but just slow that content down a little.
Oh, that's lovely. I really like that, Lynn. Thank you. And I like that you've alluded to the different background or context challenges that people are facing. So it's not just about what's happening at work or between people at work, but it's how everything else is coming in. And so even in the breakout room that we just had, I had a 4-year-old arrive whinging because she didn't have a snack and a 14-year-old on her tail, despite the fact that we've tried to do the block out the times and set up the process. The way that those piles are muddling means that even if you're at work, I mean, if you've got kids, and particularly I think for mums, it's like even when you're at work, you've still got a layer of thinking about everyone else's stuff. But when that stuff is all right there next to you, it's this whole extra layer of how much you're actually able to commit mentally to what you're doing. Ruth, I'd be quite keen to hear what your example was of how you're seeing a shift communication-wise.
Hi, Alicia. Hi, everyone. The challenge I've got, I work with counsellors and mayors, and I help facilitate conversations around a whole lot of things. And in Victoria, where I live, the councils at the moment are constrained by the legislation, which doesn't allow them to meet virtually. And only some of the councils actually live stream meetings. So there's this whole quantum shift into going online legislatively, culturally, that is enormous. And it's quite a fun space to be in, but we're hoping and waiting for the local government minister to announce a change to the legislation that councillors can meet virtually and have a quorum virtually, because at the moment they're filling up their town halls with 2 meters apart and the councillors are yelling at each other and the mayor's trying to chair meetings and it's quite ineffective. So there's a real communication shift and a great opportunity here for councils in Victoria.
Oh, amazing. Not even legal. Thanks for sharing, Ruth. I don't know if anybody else knew that, but that's certainly news to me. Amazing. Which kind of leads me into that idea around what's making it hard to connect at the moment. And I think there's kind of 3 layers to this that I was thinking about this morning. And ironically, when I was sitting down this morning trying to think about how we might run this chat today, it was like art imitating life, life imitating art. I never know what direction that goes in, but we're sitting at the kitchen table and I've got a stack of Post-it notes because that's how I think. And I'm like, oh, how should we shape this communication today? What kind of questions do we want to ask when we're on this chat? And I was playing with this idea that there's kind of these 3 elements to any communication effort around. So there's the you and them, and that's what we tend to focus on, and particularly the people that we're trying to reach. But then there's the context, and the context has always been important, but I think the context is louder and closer and more important at the moment than it has been. So while I'm sitting there talking to my partner and trying to play this idea out, at the same time, I've got 2 kids going in and out the sliding door next to me, leaving the bloody door open every time they walk through, somebody having a fight about something else. And the impact that that context was having on the conversation I was trying to have with Cam was I was getting grumpy. But instead of getting grumpy at my kids, I was getting grumpy at him. So he was asking a perfectly reasonable question about how I might do this. And I'm going, oh, for God's sake. Because the context that's got nothing to do with the chat we're having starts leaking in. And it's that pile muddling stuff. Now, getting a bit of profile today, Cam throwing a Cam again. Cam gave a talk at a conference last week, an online conference, because what other kind is there now, around putting out video content, which is why we've been talking a lot about this idea of content and connection over the last kind of week in this house. And we were talking about the difference between putting out content, filming a video, versus actually connecting with an audience, and what the difference is between just doing the one-way stream or actually inviting engagement. And I've been thinking about that a lot, because I think in the circumstances that we're in at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of content, and I'm seeing a lot of screenshots of virtual meetings popping up on my LinkedIn with everybody going, wow, look, we're having our meetings online now. No shit, mate, we're all having our meetings online. Like, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of content, and trying to pick or assume ahead of time how that's going to be absorbed, or even trying to predict how you're going to absorb something when you see it, is particularly difficult now, but is actually always quite tricky. So we've been playing with this idea about, okay, so what is the real difference between just content and connection? How do we bridge the gap? And what we landed on in the last week or so is that really the ticket to making it meaningful, to getting engagement, is about conversation. And that the elements of a good conversation apply whether you are filming a video or running a webinar or trying to communicate in a piece of internal comms or trying to communicate with your community or your parents or your stakeholder, whoever you're trying to talk to. It all comes down to these basic elements of a good conversation. So I'd be quite keen to hear from you guys in the chat box. What do you think makes a good conversation? What are the elements of good conversation? Oh, open listening. That's really nice, Janet and Cheryl. That's great. Eye contact. Oh, honestly, Cam will be the first one to talk to you about this one. Put the camera at your eye level. It's great. Two-way listening. That's great, Karen. Genuine questions. Yeah, not just, all right, everybody, how are you at? Thanks for telling me. So on to my stuff. Structure. That's really good, Nikki. Structure and listening, that balance between the two. Not multitasking while on video chat. Why, what are you doing, Tracy? You checking your emails, mate? Yeah, but I actually, that is a great point. And it is really hard when you're in a video chat online and three people have got their cameras off for whatever reason, to feel as though you're all, it's like when you're talking to someone on the phone and you keep misjudging the timing of who gets to talk next, and there's a, oh no, you go. Oh no, you go. Space and time. Don't, oh, it's all right, Cheryl, we weren't picking on you, mate. Yeah, great. Hey, there's a lot of really good answers there. And people, yeah, so trying to do two things at once. So I think that the ticket to that conversation stuff is definitely about the two-way, right? That's the difference between just the putting out content and actually connecting with someone. And when we talk about communication classically in a leadership sense, what we're generally trying to do is promote this idea that you need to be meeting people where they're at. You need to be thinking about what the people you're trying to communicate with need. And I think that's really important. That's the you part of that context, you and them. What do they need? Where are they at? What do you want them to think, do, or feel? But what I think is easy to miss is the you in that. So like that example I gave before of like stomping around my house, like, why is everybody else not listening? And then realizing at a certain point, oh, hold on. Maybe part of this is me. I think it's more important than ever to be aware of our own state when we're trying to come into these conversations. So if we're going through a bit of a checklist when it comes to actually how do we look to connect rather than just put out content. So content is very much, here's what I want to say to you. And then it would be easy to think of connection as being, here's how I want to connect with you or what I need you to feel or think or do. But I think conversation is about that middle ground that goes, where are we? So what's the context? What's going on for all of us? And then where am I at and how am I showing up? and where are you at and what do you need? And if we miss one piece of those, the content, the you or the them, it's really easy for that conversation to fall into a space that's not that useful. And the message can be fine and the format can be fine. It could be something that's worked 100 times before. But if one of those things is off, there's a kid that won't shut the sliding door, or you're not feeling flash today, or the person you're talking to is stressed because they've got a sick kid at home and they're trying to run a meeting, the whole thing falls over. So what I'd quite like to hear from you guys, if we could do some sharing again, is actually some examples that you've seen of really great connection lately, where that conversation thing has worked well, where you've felt like you've been heard, or where you feel as though you've reached someone, or where you've been sensitive to that context. So I'm just going to pop us into rooms just for a couple of minutes. And if we could share a few examples of some really great connection you've seen, I would love to highlight those, because I think it's easy in these chats for us to go to all the stuff we're not doing well, when actually there is some really great stuff happening out there. So you've all been invited to meet up with your friends again, and I'll see you back here shortly. Fancy seeing you both here. Hi, Megan. How are you? Nice to see you. What a good gang we've got here.
Hi, Megan. Did we lose you before?
Zoom kicked me out and told me I had to update
Oh,
99, and then I tried to come back in and it wouldn't let me.
Oh,
I was
bummer.
boring you.
Like,
You thought you
No,
jumped.
sorry, I felt so bad.
We were like, oops, what happened there?
yeah. I mean, in all honesty, what Georgie and Karen said to me was, Megan, they said we had this chick Megan in our room last time, and she was great, but clearly we were too boring, and she left, and we've been down on ourselves ever since.
No, not at all.
I see you all popping back in. Oh, lovely. Hey, did everyone have a good chat? I feel much better
I didn't
after
get an
that one.
invite.
Oh no, yeah, well Megan didn't have one because she got kicked out and we just thought she was too cool for us.
I'll mute me now.
What I really liked about that chat was that there was so many, I don't know about your rooms, but there were some really lovely examples shared in mine. And actually, Karen, if you wouldn't mind telling everyone about your wee example, I think that would be great for everyone to hear.
Thank you. So I had a bit of an issue with in our team, and I thought, oh, I should probably give the heads up to my boss about this. So I thought, look, he's not going to probably even want to know about this, but it could all turn bad later. So I sent him an email basically saying, I've got this issue. This is the background of it. This is what I actually need from you. Can we connect on a Zoom meeting? Because we probably just need to talk before, instead of just sending emails. So we did connect, and it was a really, really good conversation, and it was quite short, 15 minutes max. And we all knew what we were there for. He knew what I needed from him, and it was quite effective.
I love that. And what I was saying to Karen after she shared that story, and thank you for sharing it with the rest of the group, was that that's a really good, tight example of these two principles that we talk about with leadership communication. That's like the intention and the attention. So it's actually, what do I need, or what is important as an outcome out of this particular connection? What are we aiming for? And then the attention is, and what do the other people that are part of this need to have to be able to achieve that? So it's a really goal-oriented lens of thinking about our connection, where it's like, look, my intention here is that I need to get a go-ahead either way on what I do about this issue. But what does the other person need here? Well, they need some really good context, and the context needs to be tailored to what they need to make the decision. And actually, they're under pressure. They don't need to get dragged into a long email chain or a long conversation. They just need to have a really short chat where they've got everything they need to make a choice. And it's a really nice way of showing that we're respecting where everyone's at. We've appreciated the context, and we've done the you and the me. So I loved that. I thought that was brilliant. Because I think one of the things that I think about, particularly when I'm scrolling my LinkedIn feed, about the difference between that content and that connection, is that one kind of shows up as noise, but the other gives us some kind of meaning. So the difference between when you scroll past something and go, good for you, good for you, good for you. Oh, yeah, and thought about that. And so one of them is just happening around you, but the other one actually reaches you in some way. And I think that's absolutely about that one way versus the two way. It's the look where I'm working from today, or look what I did today, versus the, what do you think about this? Or here's something I thought, that makes you go, oh yeah, me too. And it's finding ways to break down that that barrier of the one way noise out, attention out, and actually what's our intention and what do I need to pay attention to? I'd be quite keen to hear another good example, because it's nice to share happy ones. Does anybody else have a nice example they'd like to share of conversation or connection done well lately? Just feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. In our
Thanks,
group,
Laura. Welcome.
Thanks. I was saying that my manager actually sent our team an email saying, I'm actually finding it really difficult to manage during remotely. And shared their thoughts and what they were thinking, and then asked us for feedback and to share their thoughts like on a one-to-one basis, not around to everyone. And I just found that really helpful, because you felt heard and listened to before you'd even said anything. And then he reflected on some of the feedback and actually was able to change his style. Like, I thought he'd been doing it a good job anyway, but then I was like, oh, for example, what I wanted was a greater understanding of what other teams were doing and get a connection in there, and then we were able to get it. So that was great.
And what do you think it was about the way that was framed, or the way that your boss pitched that felt that connected with you? What was it about that?
I think, well, there's a level of bravery and honesty that comes with saying, I'm not really sure if I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
That is kind of leveling and makes you want to be understanding and also contribute.
Yeah.
So that, I think, grabbed straight away, because I wouldn't have thought that at all. That's how he was feeling. So that was a really great, he opened up as well. So that was really helpful.
I think that's lovely. And I think if we're using that you, them context framework, I think an important part of that you is, like, we talk about the word authenticity a lot. It's become a bit of a buzzword, but the idea that you just need to be real. Like, if you actually want to connect with someone, you can't put 6 walls in between you and them and still expect to get connection. But taking those walls down actually just means being quite real and quite open and quite authentic for it to happen. And like, again, I should show you here's my plan for this webinar and what I've got written on the top. I wonder if you guys can see that if I put it in front of the camera. Will it focus on that, Cam? Can you read that top line? Just be real and stay open, right? And that wasn't actually a content guide. That was a note to myself. Because when you show up to these things and you're like, all right, I've got 50 people dialing in today that are looking for some wisdom, there's some pressure in that, right? And I think that's the same for any communication. There's a pressure to look like you know what you're doing, to give people good direction if you don't have any, to lead, to whatever that pressure is. And responding to that pressure can actually have the opposite effect you're looking for, I think, and it can make those walls. And so the chat that I was having, again, with my partner Cam, while I was trying to put this thing together, was, it's not going to be useful if I try and turn up and be an Energizer Bunny today when I'm not one. And it's not going to be useful for anybody here to show up and make out like they've got all the answers, because shit, we're all just figuring it out, aren't we? And the most useful thing we can probably do here is just have a chat about what's working and what isn't. And being as authentic as possible is really hard to do and uncomfortable to do sometimes, but makes the difference between running an online webinar or trying to simulate that conversation stuff that we do in the pub. We can just tell on someone's face where they're at. Georgie gave the example in our group of a really nice interaction she'd had with a remote co-worker recently, who was struggling, and kind of saying, look, it's not just about what people are saying or or what they're putting out there, but it's being able to stay switched on to the stuff they're not saying. And that's easier to do in a face-to-face conversation, because you've got reads on cues and body language and vibe, and paying attention to that vibe when you don't have that physical presence is an extra challenge for us all at the moment. But I think it's really important if we want to do the attention bit of the intention and the attention well. So that brings us to the end, actually, of our chat today. I don't know about you guys, but that went really fast for me. That was great. I'd be really interested to hear in the chat box as we go, just what's your key takeaway from today? Did you get a nugget? Is there anything in particular that you're going to go away going, I'm going to think about that? Oh, be real, be open. Yeah. Oh, that, and I could have just shown you the top of my planning sheet. Slow down. Yeah. That is harder for some of us than others, I think. Looking around me, I think I've got a bunch of people that it's not natural for them necessarily to slow down in these times. Context, content, connect. Oh, that's a nice summary, Karen. Awesome. Content out. Oh, actually, I really like that reflection, Sian. Take some content out of the next session. Like, the temptation when you plan for this stuff, I know for mine, is always to go, oh, I know what, I can talk about this, I can talk about that, and this leads on to that. But if we've only got this much bandwidth already, it's actually not helpful to have more piled on. Like, sometimes less is more. Bridging content and connection. Good for you, good for you, good for you. The LinkedIn scroll, that's lovely. Oh, I'm really pleased to hear that some of that reached, that we had some connection here. It's fantastic. Be human. Oh, wonderful. Look, thank you so much, everyone, as always, for coming along for another week's conversation. Now, next week is Easter Monday, and in some ways that feels completely irrelevant because we're all at home anyway. But in other ways, I think as soon as we start letting it all drop and then we just work on Easter Monday and we track pants every day, no, just me, then I think the whole thing gets set on fire. So I won't be running a webinar next Monday because I'd like you all to take the public holiday, but I will be shifting it to Wednesday at the same time, Wednesday at 11 o'clock. So if you are keen to join us again next week, I would love to see you on Wednesday, and I would prescribe for you all unhealthy amounts and quantities of chocolate for Monday instead of webinar connection. Thanks everyone so much for coming along. You rock. I will see you all next week. Have a great Easter. Ka kite.